This is NTV.
Greetings and salutations, East Africa and wherever else you're joining us from. Now, being the first Monday of October, let me wish you a wonderful and fruitful month ahead. Now, this morning, we take time to dissect a process that most people are afraid to pursue for various reasons. And for those that do, it can turn out to be a very murky affair. I'm talking about child custody and maintenance. Now, when couples are separating or divorcing, one of the issues that is likely to arise is who is to live with the children and how to ensure their well-being is catered for. Though an emotive issue, child custody and maintenance, as you will hear today, done with the right counsel and with the children's best interests in mind, can have a positive outcome. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and this is what else you can expect.
If they know that you had an abortion, they'll criminalize you.
23 women die every week from botched abortions, according to a 2012 study by the Ministry of Health.
We need government to come to our aid to assist us so that we can also give back to the society.
Elsewhere, farmers in Nigeria hope to cash in on the revival of the country's once thriving palm oil business. So what are the intricacies in this process? I'm talking about child custody and maintenance. We find out in a moment. And further afield, annual competition for the largest pumpkin kicks off the fall season in New England in the United States. Thank you for joining us on the broadcast. As I mentioned today, we shed light on custody, child custody that is, and maintenance. And that's why that question of the day to you is, have you ever pursued child custody and maintenance for your child or your children? Have you ever pursued child custody or maintenance for your child or your children? Why are you successful? Why are you not? Share that experience with us. That hashtag is a new normal. And as always, remember, we shall have a number at the bottom of your screen, and that's how you can call us if you have any questions, especially for the family law specialist with us this morning. But before we get to that very pertinent conversation, let's take a look at the impact of COVID-19 around the world and the statistics this morning. Globally, the number stands at 235,723,402 confirmed cases, 212,585,365 have recovered, and unfortunately 4,815,965 have reported or are reported to have succumbed to COVID-19. In Kenya, according to the Ministry of Health, this were 250,114 confirmed cases within the boundaries of Kenya. Out of that number, 242,535 have recovered, and we have lost 5,140 people to COVID-19 in Kenya. Well, remember, these numbers change every single day, and here on Your World, we shall always update you as and when we receive them. Now to some of the stories making headlines this morning, and we clearly start off on a victorious note, and Joycelyn Chepkosgei is the latest London Marathon winner. The New York Marathon champion cut the tape in an impressive 2 hours, 17 minutes, 43 seconds. Chepkosgei dethroned 2020 winner Bridget Kosgei, who was seeking a third successive title in the English capital. The world record holder Kosgei finished fourth behind Ethiopians Digitu Azimaro, who crossed the line second, and Ashete Bekere, who came in third. Now, Kenyan Valerie Gemeli finished the race sixth as Joan Chelimo settled for seventh place. For a second year in a row, an Ethiopian denied Kenya the men's title. This year, Sise Lema beating Vincent Kipchumba to the line. Now, Lema clocked 2 hours, 4 minutes and 1 second, which was 27 seconds ahead of Kipchumba, who finished second in London last year. Now, Ethiopian Mozinet Geremeo finished third ahead of Kenyan Evans Chebet. Last year's winner, Shura Kitata, faded to sixth place. Details and reactions, of course, on NTV Sport throughout the day, even as we take on the reactions from Kenyans from all over the country. Across the borders, and lions are classified a vulnerable species by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Their habitat is shrinking around the world, and they are already extinct in North Africa. However, in South Africa, the giant cats buck the trend as private and public game parks take down fences.
It's the annual census in the Balule Nature Reserve in South Africa's northern Limpopo province. These rangers and researchers are doing a month-long count of all predators, specifically lions, and they use impala and even a loudspeaker to lure the big cats in.
Okay, so the sound is basically it's a calf in distress, which predators are programmed to respond to, and we do this so that we can call them in and then take ID photos and identify the different individuals across the reserve, and we do this process once a year to get a take on our apex predators in the reserve.
The method is a relatively easy way to track the lion population in a reserve.
We have to do this process to count predators because it's difficult to count them from a helicopter and an aerial census. They hide under trees and it's difficult.
Last year's census identified 156 lions. This goes against the curve. The world's lion population shrank by 43% in the past 2 decades. However, here, they thrived. The secret lies in their habitat. 20 years ago, this was farmland with almost no lions. But over time, Balule and its neighbours transitioned into game reserves, and they took their fences down. It brought about an open system joining several private parks, the famous Kruger National Park, and other areas into Mozambique, 100 kilometres away. The result is a massive wildlife area, almost the size of Belgium.
Lions do incredibly well in this area, mainly because there's a large enough space for them to operate. In the rest of Africa, habitat loss is the biggest threat to lions all over the continent, and here they're flourishing because there's a large enough area that's well managed, and your apex predators are symptomatic of a well-run system.
This sleepy lioness and her pride lead a luxurious life compared to the threatened big cats in East and West Africa. And apart from the occasional run-in with a hippo, these ladies can rest a bit more easily.
Still on the continent, the Ivorian League for Women's Rights is asking for help with legal support for a woman accusing Ivorian minister for reconciliation of rape. Now, one of the Ivorian League for Women's Rights officials says the biggest difficulty in this case at the moment is the question of legal support. Until 8:10 p.m. yesterday, we could say that we had a lawyer, but the lawyer also withdrew. In this kind of cases, it's extremely difficult to get a lawyer to go with you. Now, the name, the reputation of a client, everything you can imagine is at stake here. Also, there is the obstacle of payment. So we call on the goodwill of legal professionals, practitioners from law firms and human rights organizations to accompany us so that light can be shed.
Donc, si il s'avère que c'est le cas,
Well, standing beside the piles of dark red palm fruits ready for crushing for their essence, Nigerian farmer Mika Ojo hopes to cash in on the government's drive to revive the country's once thriving palm oil business. His farm is one of the small plantations scattered across southern Nigeria, where the government is investing heavily in palm industry as part of its drive to diversify away from petroleum and help create jobs. Once a major producer, Nigeria now imports from Indonesia and Malaysia, further straining foreign exchange reserves already battered by a fall in global crude oil prices and the pandemic.
We are not satisfied with the level of operation. As you can see, we need assistance. It's a demand. You need a capital. It's capital intensive, yes, but we need that one. We need government to come to our aid to assist us so that we can also give back to the society by employing more workers. Then in the enough share, those one can also feed their family and even feed others. The central bank loan they have been talking about, we only hear it on the news. Like me now, I was into a progressive union before, EPAN. At the end of the day, after we feel from whatever we did, at the end of the day, the loan never come to us. It does not come down to the real local farmers. That's the problem we are facing.
We as a company have had the benefit of getting a loan from the CBN based on the loans that the CBN have been giving to agro-processing companies, yes. We've been privileged enough to get a loan. It has certainly helped us. It has helped us to develop our new extension 2. Notwithstanding the fact that 70% of the oil comes from smallholders and the remainder from us, we still have a shortfall in the country ongoing, and it's colloquially anywhere between 800,000 and 1.5 million tons shortfall per annum. So there's a lot of room for increase and improvement.
I can only cry. I'm devastated. My family is too, says 25-year-old Syrian Qatar Nazlan, cradling her newborn child after she was dumped by authorities within days of her due date at a migrant camp on the Mediterranean island of Cyprus after being separated at sea from her husband and children aged just 1 and 3. Now Qatar narrates, and I quote, "I was sure that my children and my husband would be transported with me and that the Cypriot Coast Guard would not separate me from them or send them back to Lebanon. This was inconceivable for me. They saw that I was accompanied by my husband and children while they were carrying me to the rescue boat. They turned my husband away when he tried to give me the children to take with me, and they prevented him from doing so." This is one of the many stories of illegal immigrants arriving from Lebanon by sea. Back in the country, last week saw the world mark the International Safe Abortion Day, and in Kenya, the Constitution eased access to abortions in 2010, but the overwhelming stigma surrounding the procedure means that many women resort to traditional practices or backstreet clinics that put their life in jeopardy. Every week, 23 women die from botched abortions, according to a 2012 study by Kenya's Health Ministry. Campaigners say the real number could even be higher.
The the type of community that we are living in, most of the people are, let me say, religious. So they will condemn you if they know that you had an abortion. No matter what people say about abortion, it is really happening. And I'm sure that in a week, at least 10 women have abortion. Now I'm talking about Dandora.
Abortion services should not be an isolated service. It should be a service that should be integrated to all other services that are being provided. And by doing so, they will reduce the number of people who are dying or getting complication out of unsafe abortions.
Singependa nikuwe na mtoto. Niko na mtoto ako university, hajaenda shule because of my condition. Niko na mtoto wa form 3, aliacha juu my condition. Tena niko na last born ambayo ni 14 years, pia ni HIV positive. Hawezi akaendelea bila mimi. Sasa hakuna mwenye atashughulika watoto kama nitakuwa na mimba sahi. Sasa naona kama ni mimba hapana.
Abortion ni mbaya. Kuwa innocent child si mzuri, ni kitu mbaya. Hiyo hata ni kitu kama umefanya unajua tu ushafanya mada, hata ukisikia watu wanaongea juu ya mada ujue pia wewe uko kwa hiyo, wewe pia ni madara. Sasa kama tu unaweza kuwa na venye unaweza saidika, solution si kufanya abortion. Abortion is a crime.
So to our conversation of the day, that is child custody and maintenance. Well, is this process shrouded in mystery, or is it that we do not really understand the intricacies behind it? And also, if you've had an experience, remember that question of the day to you is, have you ever pursued child custody and maintenance for your children or your child? And if you have, what has your experience been? Talk to us. That hashtag is a new normal as we also try to understand your experience and also get to learn more about this process. And to help us along with this, we have Victoria Mudama, who is a family law specialist. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined in the other studio by Ezekiel Kimani, who is an assistant director at the Department of Children's Services, Nairobi area. Also joined by Eusebio Sudi, who is an entrepreneur and has been a recipient of this process. Also joining us anonymously on phone, we have Nora, not her real name, and also James, not his real name. They have chosen to stay anonymous for reasons best known to them, but they would like to share their experience on the same. So thank you all for being part of this conversation this morning. Now, Victoria, I think we'll start off with you, just trying to help us understand, first of all, what is child custody? How would you define it?
I define child custody as the rights and duties that a parent has over a child. Mm-hmm. And there are two types of custody that I think people need to understand. There is actual custody and there's legal custody. So when you talk about actual custody, we mean the actual possession of a child. For example, if I live with a child from day to day, I have actual custody of the child. Whereas legal custody is the right to make important decisions over the child. So if I have legal custody, I decide where does the child go to school, can the child migrate, hospital decisions, all that is legal custody. Mm-hmm. And custody can be shared, or I can have only me who has custody. So it can be sole or joint. Uh-huh. So parents, this is now where the conflict comes in. So who has sole custody, or do we have joint custody? Sometimes parents just want to have sole actual custody and sole legal custody, and the other parents wants joint. So that's where the conflict comes in, where we come in to help solve that issue.
Okay. Do you have circumstances where you have found one party having both legal and actual?
Yes. Uh-huh. However, most courts will not give legal custody to just one parent. Legal custody in most cases is joint, because every parent, no matter how deadbeat they are, do have a right to make decisions over their child. Actual custody is where the rubber meets the road, because most times the mother is given actual custody and the father is given access, where he gets to visit the child, meet the child, but return the child back to the mother. That's the norm, it's the rule, but there are exceptions.
Okay, now we've talked about custody, but we're talking about custody, child custody and maintenance today. So the maintenance bit, define that.
Maintenance is now the cost implications of raising a child. That's education fees, food, shelter, clothing, medical. All this is maintenance. So when we talk about who has maintenance responsibility of the child is who pays for all these things, who pays for the cost of raising the child. And again, it can be a sole responsibility, it can be a joint responsibility. And that's why people go to court, again, to fight over who pays for what and or who pays for everything. Yes.
Okay, and we'll get into the intricacies of that in a moment. Let me hear from Ezekiel. You represent the Department of Children's Services, a very crucial person in this whole process. Just tell us why this is so important, your role that is.
Well, our role is the issues of custody and maintenance are actually grounded in statute. When you consider the provisions of Section 3 of the Children's Act, the government is clothed with the power to ensure the full realization of all the rights of the children. So to that extent, therefore, our children officers domiciled in all the offices within the country do actually have a very big role when it comes to issues of maintenance and custody. When a matter is reported in our office, our children officers will have to make a choice as to custody between, of course, the father and the mother. But I must hasten to add that that is an administrative decision that is being made, because you realize that a children officer does not have the power to make custody orders or maintenance orders. But that notwithstanding, and given the urgency of these matters, our officers do make remedial measures. They make a decision to provide for the child, pending the parties mounting cases in court. So to that extent, you are very much involved in all these things.
Okay, so I am curious to know, if I want to file a case, who do I go to? Do I go to the courts? Do I go to you first?
Well. I have seen parties, most of the guys, especially those who are not economically endowed, you know, the cost of litigation is actually high. So those people who are not economically endowed, they come to offices for assistance. And when such people come, you know, we cannot shy away from that responsibility. We have to ensure that the rights and the welfare of the children or the child involved is taken care of. So a children officer will have to make a decision.
Ah, okay. Yes. All right. So Victoria, for you, the moment a client comes to you, when do you involve the children's department?
All right. So once a client comes to us, we usually try to go the amicable way of resolving the dispute. First, we try mediation. Can the parties come together and agree instead of first seeking other parties to come in? So first, we try and get the parties to come, do mediation, then we come up with what we call a parental responsibility agreement. There, they can decide amicably, this is what we're going to do over the child. You do this, I do that. And we file that agreement in court. If that does not work, we go to court. Once we go to court and we file a suit, it is the court who directs that the children's department be involved. So what happens is they tell the children's department to file a report. And that's what Kimani do.
Right.
They're involved. We don't contact them. In fact, the report is supposed to be confidentially filed in court. And in that report, they'll be recommending who should have custody. They go and do home interviews. They consider all factors and they're impartial. And then they advise the court on what should be done.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's hear those that know how this shoe fits. And I'll start off with you, Eusebio. Does any of what they're saying today sound familiar, considering the process you went through?
I never got to at least get to the children's department area, but I can purely speak on what Victoria said. And yes, normally you sit down and you'll always have there'll always be mediation that takes place, especially when one of the parties, of course, gets legal representation, which means you as well as, let's say, like the defendant, you'll also have to do the same. So through that, your attorneys will always come up with a way of which the two of you will try, there will be demands, and of course there will be those that will say no to, and beyond that is when now you get to go to court if there are hard lines and there are those things that you don't get to agree. Unfortunately, when that usually happens, it's not because of the children really, it's just because of us, the parents, who probably we have differences that maybe we're not ready to deal with. So we actually just, drop it to the children. Because if I'm to speak for myself, I remember when we went to court, it's not because we could not agree, because we went to court, we already had an agreement for custody as parents. We had set out responsibilities that you will take care of this, you will cater for this. However, I was served and taken to court, and there were orders that I was supposed to do more than we had agreed to. But those were never brought up to me. Had they been brought up to me, probably I would have, we would have found a way around. Anyway, at the end of the day, we did go to court, and at the end of it, we still came back and settled on the same agreement that we had before we even went to our various lawyers, before we went to court, before we went here. So for me, it sounds very, very familiar when Victoria speaks on some of these particular aspects.
Interesting. Yes. And this agreement you're talking about, Victoria, where the two parties can agree on, okay, fine, we are not seeing eye to eye, but for the sake of the children, let's agree on this and this and this. What binds it?
Okay. First of all, it being an agreement, two parties sign.
Okay.
That's binding. However, we go a step further and we file it in court. Once we file that agreement in court, we ask the court to adopt it as an order of the court. So it ceases to just be an agreement, it becomes an order of the court, meaning you are bound just as you'd be bound by any other order of a court. So if you don't comply, we get to go to court and file an application and can even be arrested if you don't abide by that parental responsibility agreement that has now been made an order.
All right. So in the case of Sudi, he says they had, verbal agreements on what needed to be done. Then before he knew it, he was in court. So in that case, you would advise people not to actually work with the word, your word, and actually sign on it?
Yes, for sure. Sign that agreement, file it in court. Make it as tight-proof as possible, because people usually just stand back on their words and it becomes a battle of he says, she said.
Okay. And let's hear from those that want to remain anonymous. I think I'll start off with the lady. Nora, what were your circumstances, and was there any agreement before you actually ended up in court? Nora?
Gladys, hi. I think I can barely hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
No, I can hear you, but I'm losing you.
Okay, we seem to be having an issue with her connection, so let me move on to James. James, why are your circumstances the same? Did you start off with an agreement, then ended up in court?
You may want to call back.
All right, that will be done. So let's move on to James. Why are your circumstances similar?
In my case, we started off verbally, and then we involved one of our friends who was a lawyer to come up with an agreement. And then that agreement was not fulfilled because she decided the terms that we had agreed upon in that agreement were not sufficient. So she decided to file a suit. So yeah, mine was similar to the other guy, where not deciding to actually officially put the agreement as an order of the court actually went south. But in this case, I actually prefer that I prefer that we went the way of the court, because the agreement that we got out of court was way much better than what we were actually doing with the children's court. The children's department, which for some reason was very biased. But with the court, at least I got to understand some rights that I have that were not communicated to me.
Okay, interesting perspective. So let me ask you this. Were you married or just dating?
We were dating.
You were dating, okay. Eusebio, were you married, dating?
Married.
So this was legally binding?
Yes.
All right. So when they came back to you and the court decided that you just go back to what you had agreed on, James says he felt what he was given by the court was actually fairer than what they had agreed. Was that the case with you?
Actually, I mean, the court orders were pretty nice.
Yeah.
However, I also had to be, at every given time, if I'm to look at myself and look at it as who is to benefit, if it's to benefit myself, then the court way would have been the most ideal way of me getting out of this. However, we decided to settle with our before going to court, because that agreement was pretty fair in terms of also the workload that she was supposed to put in, because as Victoria said, there's usually actual custody, which in this meant that she stays with the kids for a fortnight, then I pick them at the end of it for a weekend, then take them back for another fortnight. So you'll find that in a month I see them twice, whereas she has this 28 days of which she is solely and responsible for them. And you'll find that things like shelter and whatnot, she was supposed to cater for all that. Food, the only thing that was supposed to cater for was actually just school fees and medical, which for me was pretty okay. However, when we agreed, what we had agreed before was really good, because I would get to see the kids every day. She would drop them to school, I'll pick them from school, drop them home. We would always have a cup of tea every other evening. So the kids were involved with the both of us on a daily basis. So this particular agreement, later after the court orders and whatnot, we sat down, went back to mediation. We agreed to go back to our original plan. Once we set it out, we had the consent done, and we filed it in court, as Victoria had stipulated. We filed it in court. Until today, that is what holds.
So this time round, you were wiser to ensure that the court was involved. Okay.
I had to be.
All right, interesting. And let me bring in Ezekiel. You know, most often than not, even when we talk about child custody and maintenance, the men think they will always be disadvantaged because, I mean, the women are looked as the primary caregivers to these children. But we have two cases here saying that the courts actually smiled on them. Do you see this a lot? And what would actually inform this kind of decision?
Well, when it comes to custody of children of tender years, of course, there is the prevailing jurisprudence in our country that is to the effect that the custody of children of tender years is always to be with the mother unless there are exceptional circumstances to warrant the court to give the father custody.
How tender is tender?
Well, when you consider Section 2 of the Children Act, those children below, from 10 years to below, those children are referred to as children of tender years. Those are children with special needs, and such needs are to be, I think, the most appropriate person to cater for such children is the mother. And I think that is the thinking behind that jurisprudence.
So in this case, we're saying any case that has children under 10, the actual custody will be given to the mother.
Precisely. However, if it is proven to the satisfaction of court that special circumstances are present, then custody could be given to the father despite the age of the children. But you see here the stakes are against men. The burden of proving exemption of circumstances lies with the man. Therefore, that is why mostly men say that the law is against them, but that is the way it is. Young children, children of tender years, due to their special needs, they are supposed to be taken care of by the primary caregivers, who are the mothers.
Okay, and when you talk about special circumstances, what are you alluding to?
Well, by special or exemptional circumstances, I have in mind that kind of a parent who cannot be able or who cannot be relied upon to take good care of the child. Say, for example, a mother is abusive to the children. She is the one who is partying from Monday to Friday without having time to be with the children. Those are some of the circumstances the court may consider special to grant custody to the father.
Okay, there's a question here actually that if the mother is not able or is not employed, does not have a consistent cash flow, would that work against her?
That may not necessarily work against them because the economic endowment is not a major consideration for custody. It is not.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting. But we'll come back to that because when it comes to maintenance, I think there's something you have to consider in that. But let's hear from the lady. I think we have Nora back on the line. Nora, what were your circumstances? When you listen to the gentleman, are they similar or yours were a little bit different?
Hi, Gladys, and thanks for having me on the show. I barely heard what the gentleman had to say.
Okay.
Where they said they felt that the court, they were happy with what the court did.
All right. So now that I know a bit of your story, let's give perspective in as far as when did you end up in court, if at all?
I did end up in court. And going to court over maintenance is a very emotional journey because the reason why you end up in court is because someone isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Contrary maybe perhaps to the published perception that people are just looking for their own upkeep. I think that's where part of the challenge comes. I was a stay-at-home mom, and so he was the sole breadwinner. So when we went our separate ways, and the upkeep wasn't happening, then I really didn't have an alternative but to resort to the judicial system at the time, yeah.
Okay, and when you did, before you even got to the judicial system, are you saying that you tried to, talk it out and it did not work?
Not necessarily, because, people part in different ways. So ours is a nil-by-mouth kind of parting, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if somebody doesn't want to talk to you and they're not responsive, you have to figure out what else is available in terms of, because the best interests of a child here are what is important. Yeah, I mean, you've already come to the conclusion that the relationship is over, but the best interest of the child is what you're now seeking.
Okay, and were you dating, married?
I was married.
And when you went to court, was it clear on how this should be done?
Clear on what should be done?
Yes, in terms of the custody or maintenance, which is what you were pursuing.
By the time I went to court, by the way, we were not divorced. We were just living apart. So I wasn't pursuing divorce at that point in time. I think what was important was the child had needs. He had set up the child or we had set up the child in a certain level of life and certain needs, and those needed to be taken care of because initial conversation was he would continue to do the same. And in between, that's what I'm saying, it's an emotional journey. Every time the rent has to be paid, you're in a bind, emotionally. Every time school fees has to be paid, you're in a bind emotionally because you don't know whether it's coming or not. So I just needed some consistency and some, just some settling.
Okay, and did you get that from court?
I did, although I think I'll agree with the children's department rep that I didn't know about the children's department, by the way. I think from an educated point of view, I knew there were laws, and I just downloaded the Children's Act. I read it. I saw we both had rights. The child has, or rather, we had responsibilities, and the child has rights.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a matter of if I should. at that point in time, again, because I wasn't working, it was a matter of I needed to do it in the best interest of the child.
Okay, and what I'm asking is, after going through the process, was the child catered for?
Yes, he is being catered for. It's been many years now. It's been an up and down process as well. Because, you know, along the way, somebody defaults, and you have to resort back to, you know, not very, you know, it's very antagonistic, by the way, unfortunately. In terms of going back to court, it's very antagonistic. I wish the two adults would just agree we are interested in our child, and we're going to do what's best according to them. Yeah.
All right. Now, Victoria, a few things come up in the various conversations we've had. Married or not married, does it make a difference with the process?
Not really. So long as you are the parent of a child, you have parental responsibility over that child. So nowadays, it's a non-issue. You're the parent, you have responsibilities, married or unmarried.
Okay, so in the case of Honora, she's saying that she had no choice but to go to court because her relationship was nil by mouth. So in such a case, how do you deal with this sort of circumstance?
Yes, in such a case, as she has explained, sometimes it's not possible for parties to come together. It's too acrimonious. Even if you bring them together, it just gets worse. So the best solution is, as she did, just go to court, file a suit, let him come, defend himself, and the court decides what's the best decision. And he has to abide. And sometimes, like she says, sometimes they default, even they refuse to disobey, they refuse to obey the court orders, and you have to go back to court and file what we call a notice to show cause, where you threaten them with arrest. And then now they start paying again. So like she said, it's a very draining process. It can be emotionally draining, it can be financially draining. And that's why we really try as much as possible to go the agreement way. But if it's not possible, we just have to go the court way and hope for the best.
Okay, my question is, if there are clearly stipulated legal processes and the court has jurisdiction over the orders it gives, why is it that some people that feel I can just not do what I was supposed to do and get away with it?
Yes, some people just are not bothered and they have no fear. It's like the way we just see some people in power really just don't obey court orders. It trickles down to the common wananchi. I mean, if he doesn't obey court orders and nothing happens to him, even me, I can do the same thing.
Okay.
But we do have recourse for that. We go back to court, we file an application. Either you obey or get arrested.
All right. Now, let me speak like the layman, and I'll just use some of the law we've seen on TV series. Contempt of court.
Yes.
You've been told to do something, you refuse to do it.
Yes.
Isn't there something that legally binds this person? Like they can be arrested or serve time?
Yes, that's what happens. So we go back to court and in children matters, we do what we call a notice to show cause. Why you should not be arrested for failing maybe to pay maintenance of this amount. So he comes to court, he either explains why he has not paid or he's arrested. That's the recourse.
Okay.
That's our contempt of court. Yes.
All right. Now, in this case, and I think this is where we need to underscore that the right of a child is so important.
It is.
Can you stipulate the rights of a child in this whole process?
Stipulate?
Like what is expected that the child should walk away with or should remain constant?
The best interests of the child are always paramount. Are they being taken care of? There are 5 most important rights. Rights to education, to food, to shelter, to clothing, to education. At the end of the day, the child, it must be clear that the child gets these 5 things. Whoever it comes from, either the mother or the father, most times they share. The mother, of course, if she has actual custody, will be responsible for maybe food and shelter and sometimes clothing. Then the mother, like the father, like Sudi, will be told to pay for education and the medical needs. That always has to come out. At the end, when the court gives a judgment, it has to be clear, at least those 5 things, we know who is taking care of them and that they're being met. Yes.
Okay, so Ezekiel, when we have parties that actually contravene the court orders, what do you do? What role do you play in ensuring that the rights of the children are actually enforced?
Well, when the matter is referred now to court, we do not have much of a role kwa sababu, for the reason that the court has seized of this matter, and the only recourse that the parties can have is to make reference to that very court for the enforcement of such orders. However, that notwithstanding, the court in many occasions would order us to help in the enforcement of the orders. Yes, but you see, it has to come from the court.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, so the question here would be, because you are involved in doing the reports, ensuring that you actually inform the court accordingly, perhaps if somebody came and said the other party is not living up to it, they would have to call on you to ensure that what is being said is true?
Not necessarily. They must, the first point of call is the court. Because you see, when the parties decide to go to court, then we have to down our tools. We have to let the matter be arbitrated by the court to its final conclusion, such that where there is a need for us to help in the implementation and the enforcement of the orders, again, the court has got to make that order directing to us. Yes.
Okay, so you assist the court when they ask you to.
Precisely.
I see. Okay, let me go back to James. James, you mentioned that your circumstances were also acrimonious. Was that something that perhaps made it even a little bit more harder to implement the orders of a court? James? Is James still with us? I know we are using a pseudonym. We might forget what our pseudonym is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
Sorry. Come again?
So the question is, your circumstances were also acrimonious. When you went to court and you were given orders, did this complicate implementing these orders in real time?
No. Actually, what the court orders helped to bring on was structure. Because before then, I would probably call or text to ask for permission to have my child. And at times I'd be denied. But now, with the court orders, what it brought on was structure, and especially for the benefit of the child, because probably I'd end up seeing my child once a month. But with the court orders, now I have the child almost like, for holidays, half. Every month, I think I have like maybe a whole week. So pretty much it really just ended up in my favor because I really wanted access for my daughter. I needed to be there for my daughter. And the other party was going for full custody, more or less just trying to deny me access. But with the court orders and everything that happened with the agreement, everything just went in favor for the child first and then myself.
I see. Now, we're about to take a short break here on Your World. When we come back, everyone, I think, who has been a recipient of this process has said there's something they discovered about the process they didn't know, and actually it's very important to know, and it helped them out in the process. We'll hear more about that in a moment. But before I take that break, remember, we're also asking you, have you pursued child custody and maintenance for your children or your child? What has been your experience? We have God who says, I can never be responsible for the child who's not under my custody. Leave the kid with me and we'll cater for everything. Or go with the kid and don't bother me. Go to court to deal with me. I go Taliban way or traditional way to deal with you vigorously. This is so sad to hear, but unfortunately, this is a reality that most people face. Rose Blessings, who says, men will always be clients for this. They hate responsibility, but they want kids to call them dad. Rose, we hear you. Another one here from Charles Muriuki, who says, men must mature and take responsibility of a child. It's the responsibility of both adults, whether married or not, staying together or not. Take up your responsibility and provide for your own child. Charles, thank you for giving that sober feedback, and we are taking more of your feedback and experiences even as you pursue this process of child custody and maintenance. We'll be right back.
you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, we offer free delivery within the same day? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
Je, wajua? Dawa ya Bedlam ina uwezo wa kuua viwango vyote kutoka mayai hadi kunguni aliyekomaa. Je, wajua? Hakuna madhara ya kukaa chumbani baada ya kupuliza.
Bedlam imethibitishwa na shirika la afya duniani WHO kwa matumizi ya nyumbani. Kwa maelezo zaidi wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari au tovuti yetu iliyo kwenye runinga yako. Tumia Bedlam 200 SL, uangamize kunguni kabisa.
His Excellency Hassan Ali Joho has granted 100% waiver on all interest for residential, commercial, industrial and agricultural property rates. All property owners in Mombasa County are advised to take advantage of the waiver period that ends on 20th October 2021. Take notice that once the waiver period lapses, the county government will institute all necessary measures to recover any unpaid rates and penalties through legal proceedings, including repossessing of the defaulter's land. Lipa kodi, epuka hodi.
AMRC's objectives are aligned with the government's affordable housing pillar of the Big Four agenda. Visit any of the participating financial institutions today and start your home ownership journey. Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, unlocking liquidity for affordable housing.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today, child custody and maintenance is our conversation. This is one emotive conversation and process. Most would rather not even start off, but those who have to have gone down that process and are pleasantly surprised that the structures are very clear on how this should be handled. Helping us along with this is Victoria Mudhama, who is a family law specialist. We're also joined by Ezekiel Kimani, Assistant Director at the Department of Children's Services, Nairobi area. Eusebio Sudi, who is an entrepreneur. And of course, our anonymous recipients of the system are Nora and James. Now, I'd like us to have the feedback we had the last time we had this in the last hour. Can we have that first feedback? Because I'd like to hear reactions from our panelists. I can never be responsible for the child who's not under my custody. Leave the kid with me and I will cater for everything, or go with the kid and don't bother me. Go to court to deal with me. I go Taliban way or traditional way to deal with you vigorously. Let me start off with Nora. When you hear that, what emotions does it elicit, and does it sound closely familiar with what you were dealing with?
Really closely familiar, but contrary to perhaps what you would expect, it's a laughable comment. I think because first of all, it tells the state of mind of the person in terms of where they think they are. And when it comes to children's matters, the adults have absolutely no right. It's the child who has a right. So it is the right of the child that will be looked after, whether you go Taliban or not. But that is a scary statement in itself, because sometimes it is the fear of many parents who get the custody of the child. Yeah.
Okay, and what is the greatest fear from your experience? Because I'm sure you've had a chit-chat with other females who've gone down this process.
I think from my experience and from those who have had to have gone down the process, really it's the other person not living up to what has been. Okay, sometimes it's what has been agreed or that has been ordered, because it really depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me hear from the men, and I'll start off with you, Sebio. Just listening or just reading out that feedback, considering your circumstances, what say you?
Well, unfortunate, very unfortunate, really, because it's your child. It's not your ex-spouse child, or I don't know, it's not the neighbor's child, it's your own child. So when I hear such statements, it really just burns my heart, because it tells me a lot about you than about the situation in itself. And I'll always advise guys, I mean, whatever the case may be, always, I mean, take care of your child, man. And even when you financially can't, I mean, you're still an emotional being. You can still support in so many ways, you'll be shocked. I mean, take care of your baby, man. Go, pick ask, I mean, try and be mature enough to have a good relation with your ex-spouse, and this serves both sides, whereby the welfare of the child takes precedence. I mean, and it becomes your sole, I mean, it becomes your sole purpose, the both of you, just to make sure that her intellect, her emotional status, you know, and our well-being is well catered for. So when I hear such statements, I just go to, I don't even have much to say. And
All
I
right.
Just say sorry to whoever the other party is.
All right. Now, you said even before you were taken to court, you had already agreed on something, because you both had seen this was not working, but there were children involved. How many kids are involved?
3 kids.
3 kids.
Yeah.
So most often than not, this is the narrative that is associated to men, but you're the guy here saying the complete opposite. So what is it about the circumstances or what you were seeing playing out that made you stay sober?
Well, first and foremost, God. And I mean, these are my gifts. Forget about my ex-wife, but these are my gifts as well. And I think they become, if anything changes between me and her, they come first place. So even when I may have differences with her, I have to make sure that I look at her through the lenses of my kids. And that will really, for me, that really matters. Regardless of the status or the situation, I have to do that because, first of all, we've invested so many years together and we've had 3 amazing kids. So we may have differences, we may have, we agree in maybe 2 or 3 things out of 20, but the most important things is always comes in when we put our kids first. When you bring our kids up, it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's the mother of my children. You can't mess with that. So, including myself.
Okay.
Yeah, and my belief, I believe blessings go down that way. So I wouldn't want anything else to draw down to my kids, including me being mean or me being vicious towards her. I mean, that I don't think I'll live with myself with that.
Okay, so for you, James, again, I'll go back to your case. It's interesting because your story is a little bit different from any other couple. You're the one who was having a hard time proving that you are a straight-up guy and you wanted this just for the sake of your child. How did you handle it and what did you learn as you were, going through this process?
First things first was I have a right to access my child, and there's a difference between actual custody and having access. Actual custody, shared custody, and access. And I think I was being denied access and also the shared custody. Because most decisions that were made between that period where I was denied that access and that custody, a lot of decisions were made without my consent. So with the process, I also got to learn that there's certain rights that I have to my child. We have a daughter, so I also understood that I cannot be granted full custody or like actual custody because she's of tender age. And that I was very okay with because we had also agreed that since she's a girl, that she should stay with the mother. That I had no problem. Secondly, there's certain responsibilities that are given to the mother and certain responsibilities given to the father. So majority of the responsibilities that were expected from me without my knowledge of the rights that I had were very oppressive. So, and this came from, unfortunately, the children's office.
Oh.
So, yes, that's why I was saying it was very biased. So once we got to court, a lot of these responsibilities were lifted, again, because I had shown proof that I had been providing and I had been trying to actually reach my child. So the probably one of the things I'd actually also say is not all men are irresponsible, because that's the thing that usually goes round, that because a relationship has failed or whatever has happened between two people, that it was also the gentleman's fault, and we're labeled all sorts of things. But no, for this one thing, I decided to be different. I was going to fight for my child regardless.
Now tell me this, James. Why, or what were the reasons why you were being denied access?
First of all, my lack of knowledge. I had no idea what the Children's Act was about or what it entailed. So when we got to actually talking, first of all, verbally, because for the sake of peace, I just decided to just take on whatever it is that she was asking. Then I think, unfortunately, she got a little bit too greedy, decided to go to court and ask for more, because in a span of maybe 5 months, I had sent quite a large sum of money. I think she wanted to pursue more. Okay, I've lost track.
Okay. All right. So at this point, what were you being accused of by the other party as to why they did not want you to see the daughter?
The allegations that were made were really bad. Like, I was dangerous to my child. I was not providing for my child. I'd put my child in situations that were dangerous for her. The allegations that were made were really bad. Yes. I think they just tried that to just more or less have a case, and I was told that by my lawyer to just make a case for it to get to court. And that was very unfortunate.
Okay. So, Ezekiel, when the courts call on you to do a background check on the case that has come before them, what exactly do you look into to ensure that you have all the facts right?
Well, what we normally do as a practice, we interview all the parties. We do a home visit to their houses or their places of residence. Then we also seek to interview the child with a view to obtaining the ascertainable wish. Then, with all that information in mind, what a children officer does is actually to recommend to court by elevating the interest of the child over and above the interest of the parties. You realize when you make a decision, when you make a recommendation that may not be very favorable to one party, then they may be dissatisfied. But basically what a children officer is supposed to do is to elevate the interest, the best interest of the child, the welfare of the child, over and above the interest of the parties that are in contention. Yeah.
Okay, now, Ezekiel, if the child is too young to communicate the circumstances they're in, how do you handle that?
I may wish to go back to what I said when it comes to children of tender years. Of course, there are those children who are not possessed with sufficient knowledge for them to actually communicate what they want. So in those circumstances, maybe the paramountcy principle would come into play, where if the child is of tender years, custody in the first instance would actually go to the mother. That would then put the father to prove existence of exemption or circumstances so that the court can grant them custody of the children.
Okay, isn't that a little bit unfair, especially if you were to put, for example, case in point, James' circumstances, okay? Being accused of something falsely, excuse me, there is no child to speak on his behalf, then how do you then go to court and say we can sufficiently say because the child is underage, they should be with the mother?
Well, in his case, what ideally ought to have happened is for officer to actually get all the facts of the case, and with all the facts of the case, then seek to make a recommendation that is not very pleasing to the parties, but is the one that will promote and protect and safeguard the best interest of the children. That is what I'd say, because you see, you cannot always please all the parties. And you have, when you are doing a report, you have to make a recommendation to court. So if my recommendation is not favorable to you, that does not mean that I am biased. It is the facts that I have on the ground. I apply the law with those facts, and then I give my recommendation. The recommendation, again, is not legally binding. It is just an advisory opinion to court, which the court may take or may not take because it is advisory. It's not legally binding.
Okay, Ezekiel, do you have a department that perhaps does private investigation to ensure that what you're going to find out firsthand is not actually manipulated or acted out?
Well, I don't think we have reached that level.
Yes.
So if a matter is referred to me, it's me who is going to do that, to investigate, to carry out social inquiry, and with the information I have, then I can be able to do a report to court.
Okay,
yes.
So Victoria, you have a client. They're saying the other party is not playing fair. Do you ever go looking for a PI to do the investigation for you and perhaps file that on behalf of your client?
Rarely. It's a very risky thing because as I was advised by someone, sometimes the PIs are even bought and it backfires on you.
Yeah.
So we rarely go that route. What we do is just present our client's case as best as we can. And we just hope that the court will be able to make a wise decision based on what we have. We rarely go that PI route because it can get murky and it can backfire on us. Yeah.
All right, we've had from Nora, we've had from James, acrimonious relationships that have been, resulted to a pull and tag. What have you seen as most often the outcome of such circumstances?
Well, it can go two ways. Most times, the court makes a decision and the parties accept it and they obey and they live, well, not happily ever after, but best case scenario is that every party complies. So if the father is supposed to provide, he sends maintenance money and the mother gives access to the father as agreed or as ordered by the court. However, like we saw with the first comment, sometimes it doesn't go that way. For example, the mother is ordered to provide access to the father, and the father is ordered to pay maintenance. What happens is, should the father fail to pay maintenance, the mother refuses to give him access. So it becomes a push and pull.
Yeah.
It's a bargaining chip where now, because he's not doing this, I will not do this. So it comes to a standstill where now you have to go back to court, and one of them has to really move. One of them has to give up their ground, and so that they can be progress in the matter. But that's the reality of the matter. It becomes, it goes back to being acrimonious.
Yeah.
Because of one party not obeying the orders. Yes.
Okay, now we have seen even on the news where the court has granted the mother custody, but the children blatantly refuse and they say, no, we want to go with our father. How is that handled? And yet, these children, as Ezekiel is saying, are of tender age, under 10.
Yes, so that's a very unfortunate incident because the court has made its decision. It has taken into account everything. So by the time it's giving the mother custody and the children are insisting to go with the father, it becomes difficult because we have court orders that have to be obeyed. And yes, these are children of tender years, they do not have ascertainable wishes. So they can't really, their wishes cannot be taken into account. The best thing that would happen is that maybe these children are taken into counseling so that they can be eased into the process of accepting their mother as the person who has custody over them. Because court orders have been made, they have to be obeyed. Okay. Though the best thing is to just manage the situation and make it as easy as possible for the children and make it as smooth as possible.
Is there or are there circumstances where the court has said, okay, fine, this is unusual for children to refuse their mother as such, there must be something we're missing, and perhaps ask that they interview the children personally, like the judge themselves?
That has happened, but again, you see, the fact that they're of tender years really does not give whatever they say much weight.
Really?
That is the problem, because what the court takes into account are ascertainable wishes of the child, but they have to be of an age where they understand what it is that is happening. So when they're of tender years, it becomes a very tricky situation, because sometimes even children are coached by their parents on what to say. Sometimes they're told, both say this, go do that. So the court has to really be careful, because they don't want to set precedent where we are now making decisions based on what a child says. That is very shaky ground.
Okay.
Yes, so sometimes children are interviewed by the court, but they have to take into account, is this child of an age where they understand? Have they been coached? Are they lying? Is there a reason? You know, and if there are reasons, maybe it can be investigated further. But the judge cannot make a decision based solely on something that a child of tender years has said.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective, and I'd like to hear from Sharon. When you think about, or rather not Sharon, we're talking about Nora. I've got a couple of pseudonyms that will be coming across in a moment. Nora, with your circumstances with your son, has he ever seen the father? Has there been that shared custody where there's actually visitation rights? Nora, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So do you have, are there visitation rights? Does the son see his father?
Before I answer your question, maybe I want to ask a question or make a comment, because I thought the Children's Act also, to Victoria's comment about the children, that whoever has actual custody for a period of time prior to the issue being handled, the children should not be removed from the home. So she can answer that one maybe later. So in my case, like I said, without going into too much details, we have had no contact with the father.
Okay.
Yes.
So the son has never seen his father. Has the father ever asked to see his son?
He has.
And why have they never met?
They haven't met because for the longest period of time, he went and was quiet, was not interested. And then, you know, when you start walking back like you know, check something. For me, what I asked for was counseling. And he declined counseling for the longest period of time. Because how do you just walk away, show no interest, then decide, which is the unfortunate thing about some of these issues, is that you're able to make a decision in your best interest, not in the best interest of the child. And then again, when you decide to disrupt the child's life, you're making a decision in your best interest, not necessarily in the best interest of the child. So you think you can walk in and out at leisure. That is one thing I was clear was not going to happen.
Okay.
So in between, and as part of our negotiations, counseling was a part of the deal, which he declined. Yes. Happy to say, though, that we are finally going into counseling. But unfortunately, the child has also grown quite and has his own feelings too. He's expressing his own feelings. So it's still work in progress.
Oh, wow. How old is the child now?
14.
14. Okay, that's an interesting perspective.
Let's say he's a young man.
He actually is a young man. And this is what I'll even want to throw to one of the gentlemen here, and especially Eusebio. The children will grow. They're the ones who are watching what's happening, the pull and tag between mom and dad. Did you ever sit down, both you and your partner, and explain to your children what exactly was happening?
Yes, we did. We did that day one. The moment we separated, we sat down, we spoke to them. The moment the children's court matter came, we sat down, all of them, and explained to them. Mm-hmm. They've always been on the loop. I mean, in the loop. There's no one stage that the two of us have either had differences, and differences that literally affect them, mm-hmm. that we've not discussed or at least explained to them. To this day. Mm-hmm. I mean, to this day, that's what we do. In our differences, in whatever it is, we always, I don't know how we do this, but we always humble ourselves, and we realize, I think we have big fish to fry here, so we have to literally put them first in whatever decision that we have.
Okay, there's something that Nora is actually mentioning, the importance of counseling, because these circumstances come with huge changes, not only to the two parties that are adults, but also to the children. Have you pursued this?
Day one, we did that. The moment we sat with them to explain to them what the two of us were up to, mm-hmm. The next day we signed them up for counseling, both in school and also with an independent party. I also was receiving counseling. Mm-hmm. I think my ex-wife was doing the same. But with my counselor and my therapist, my kids were also brought in. And she had also to take them through the process. Oh. So we never left any stone unturned when it came to this little guys who right now are pretty big. I've had Nora's, my daughter is turning 14.
Your daughter is turning?
She's turning 14 in 2 months. Mm-hmm. So, and that's my eldest child. So when you look at this, I mean, we've literally made sure that their welfare, and that's what I was saying. I mean, it's not only about, people always think it's just about maintenance in terms of finances and whatnot. No, I mean, there's a lot there's a lot that goes into a child. I mean, and what a child requires. Just the sight of having or knowing that your dad is there, mm-hmm. and your dad can literally call or say something to you. Same thing with the mom, just to know that you have access of whichever kind, even when it's not like the best, even if it's a visitation, mm-hmm. just having that relation somewhere going on. These are questions you don't want them asking themselves when they're 21, 22, you don't want that. Yeah. So you're better off just taking care of those things now and putting emotions. Again, it's an emotional investment. I mean, nobody likes to separate or divorce. I don't think people get into these things thinking of that, especially with kids coming along and whatnot. However, what is usually critical, since you've already crossed that bridge, immediately everything shifts to the welfare of the kids. Not about the two of you.
I hear you. So before we take a quick break here, I'd like to hear from James. James, despite everything that has happened, and now that you have your rights and you get to see your daughter, did both of you explain to your daughter why exactly things had to change?
She's still at that age where trying to tell her some things really don't make sense. But we individually ease her into this whole arrangement. Like when she has to go back to the mom, she may cry, but I'm like, you know what? You have school tomorrow, mm-hmm. And mommy misses you, and I'll see you next Friday, and yeah. So mm-hmm. at this point, we're just trying to ease her into this whole arrangement. Mm-hmm. When she says she wants to stay with me, I usually just tell her there's school. So she understands that there's some things that she needs to do also on her end. Like, yeah, there's school, there's mommy who misses you, there's things, you have friends at home. I decided, because right now we are still not seeing eye to eye. We still cannot sit together with my former partner. But I decided on my end that I'll try and ease my daughter into all this, like slowly. As she grows up, we just update the narrative. Mm. Yeah, when she asks questions, we try and ease her into this whole process or arrangement. Yeah, but the idea is to have her know that she has both parents.
Okay.
Both parents really love her and are there for her.
Very critical, very critical. Okay, before we take that short break, I am told that you're talking to us even as you share your own experiences in as far as child custody and maintenance is concerned. Remember that hashtag is new normal if you can have that feedback. We have Charles Muriuki who says, unless you are very ignorant of the law, any child under the age of 18 is under the custody of the mother, and you as the father must provide for them the basics of life, whether married or not, staying together or not, in a courtship or not. It's your sole responsibility to be the provider for your child. Okay, Charles Miruki is very clear on that. Usilete Makasiriko says, when a child is living under my roof, I'll try hard and provide everything I can. I can never and will never provide for a child not in my house, not even a penny. Again, there are those who take this hard stance, but then again, as we've heard here, the law is very clear on how the children should be catered for, and their best interest actually takes precedence and takes priority in this whole process. We'll be right back.
Get the best value for your money by subscribing today for Classic Bouquet at only 899 shillings for 30 days to enjoy 64 channels. Classic Bouquet. Premium content on Star Times. Subscribe today.
Stanbic Bank, it can be.
I'm growing up, I'm growing into every moment. So if
Nurture the moment. Minute Maid Nutri Defenses, fortified with vitamin E and zinc to help improve your defense system.
Oh, Falcione. Do you know me? No.
Wow, thank you for your time. How juicy.
Young Scientists Kenya brings you the 4th National Science and Technology Exhibition on 5th to 8th October 2021. Since 2018, YSK has reached over 100,000 students from all 47 counties through its STEM mentorship and outreach program. This year, YSK answered the President's call for inclusivity by initiating the Leave No Learner Behind program that enhances STEM education access for students with special needs, marginalized girls, and those in arid and semi-arid lands. Join us live on the 5th of October from 4 p.m. for the opening ceremony and more, only on NTV. Young Scientists Kenya, inspiring and empowering youth towards STEM.
AMRC's objectives are aligned with the government's affordable housing pillar of the Big Four agenda. Visit any of the participating financial institutions today and start your home ownership journey. Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, unlocking liquidity for affordable housing.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today, the conversation is child custody and maintenance. Before we get back to that conversation in a moment, let's take a look at the other world. Now, a London university has set up a clinic for students to get vaccinated against COVID-19 ahead of the new term. But attendance is low, as many say they are reluctant to get jabbed. Uptake of vaccines has been very disproportionately low, that's a very long word, among young British people, and the capital lags behind in the UK as a whole.
The numbers are not massive, and this probably reflects actually the good rollout of the vaccines, certainly for the UK population, but also in many of the countries from which our students are coming from. And it's nice to actually see that many of them have actually engaged in vaccination before coming over. But those that haven't had the chance have now got the chance to do that.
This is just later of everything that we've been discussing today. It's got more information.
So we are meeting more people, going out of the house. I think that's probably one reason why I didn't get the vaccine, because I was always at home, wasn't working, wasn't going to school. So I didn't see the need. I didn't feel exposed. So at the moment, I'm always outside, classes resuming, so always in the train.
I think the young adults are really the difficult age group to try and catch, because they hear a lot of misinformation on social media. They've obviously got a lot of concerns. They hear these stories about sort of impact on fertility, which is totally fictitious.
We've seen all the information that they've been able to give us and stuff like that, so it's much appreciated, but we just want to further our information, and when the time's right we'll just get the vaccine. But for now, to keep us safe and for everyone's safety, we just have to test every time we come into uni, so that's the best thing we can do for now.
We've looked at that slightly when what is
Elsewhere, British Royal Ballet dancers William Bracewell and Fumi Kaneko rehearse ahead of their return to the public stage as Romeo and Juliet during a special performance in front of the press ahead of World Ballet Day on October the 19th, saying they are eager to get the joyful parts of life back after a year of playing to empty houses.
We haven't done this three-act ballet for ages, because last year we had some performance but small pieces. So to be able to dance with whole companies, ballet dancers, is so special. And yeah, Romeo and Juliet is my dream role, so I'm enjoying every minute of rehearsals right now. Even when we came back to studio, we had to wear mask and small amount of people. I think we did struggle a lot with breathing in mask as well, but because in that way we could do what we wanted to do, so we had to do to be able to do what we do.
Is there something about, I think, the arts in general, that they are nourishing, not in the physical living sense, but in like a soul sense. So it's kind of hopefully what we've made, everyone has made so many sacrifices for, is to start hopefully coming back to getting back to some sort of normality and getting the joyful parts of life back as well. Some of the first rehearsals we had, where I started partnering again, felt it was like I hadn't done it for so long, but it was like a piece had been missing from what I do, and then when we finally could, it kind of clicked into place.
Wow, let's just say we are all talented differently. That's a beautiful performance there. And it's good to see the world so slowly coming back to some sort of normalcy. Now back to studio and to that conversation of the child custody and maintenance. And I still have my panelists here, and we're now joined by somebody who perhaps will bring a perspective of a child. Now here's the thing. Anyone who's gone through this process, seen their parents go through this process, some have grown up and some still carry the scars of what happened back then. We're now joined by Sharon, not her real name. And Sharon, after watching your parents go through this process, what is the one thing you'd want to put out there that parents who are walking this path should keep in mind?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
What I like to put across, child custody is not a problem. The problem is that the maintenance of the child. As much as jaribu one way or another kuweka hiyo familia ya kuwa iwachane, si vizuri ya kuwa waachane kwa sababu watoto ndo wanaumia. On one way or another, I'm a victim of that.
Yes.
And the experience was not good. My parents separated while I was still young. And we suffered a lot. Unajua wafahali wawili wakipigana ni nyasi ndio inaumia. Yeah. So my parents, my father was well up, so tuliachwa na custody of baba. Baba ndiye alitulipia school fees. But on one way or another, my parents were still young, so they decided to go and look for their partners. And we are from a staunch Christian family. They are not even supposed to look for another partner, but due to one cause or another, they had to look for their partners. So when you only look for their partners, we are the one who suffered, because that love we have approached one parent is not easy. As much as the other parent mwenye amekam in akona hiyo interest ya kuwachunga, but haizi kukuchunga kama mzazi wako. Okay. So what I can say, Gladys, we suffered a lot. In terms of love, hatukupata hiyo love kabisa ya mother to father. In terms of discipline, one parent cannot discipline a child the same way that the real parent can discipline her. I remember at one time nilikuwa nimekosa, and I knew that nimekosa. You know what I did, Gladys? Nilitoroka nikaenda juu my second parent, my mom akuwa mbali, nikaenda kwa my mom. So you can see those things are not good in such a way that discipline pia I could consider. When I went to my mom nikamdanganya, my dad amenifuguza. So in terms of divorce, it's not a good thing, Gladys. Yeah, juu watoto ndo wanaumia sana sana. And that thing affects you hata ukiwa grown up.
All right.
Now I'm grown up, I have my family, but I have that phobia. What happened if this and this happened and my children are left alone?
I hear you. I hear you, Sharon. Thank you for calling in and being so candid about your own journey. Asante sana. All right, so Victoria, when you are going through whether mediation or the court process, is there leeway for psychosocial support?
Yes, there is leeway. We usually have psychologists that we can recommend, because we understand, like what Sharon is saying, it can be a very difficult transition, not only for the parents, but especially so for the children. Because the ideal situation is father, mother, and children living together in harmony. So anything other than that is, of course, going to cause some upheaval in the child's life. And we acknowledge that, and we usually recommend psychologists. And sometimes even the court recommends psychologists.
Yes.
So that these children they can be helped through the process. Because the reality is, there is no way this can happen and the child is not affected.
Yes.
It's the reality of the matter is this is something that's going to negatively impact the child.
All right, and talking about the impact on the child, Nora had mentioned that her son is 14, very clear about what he wants, and he has not been keen on meeting his father. What happens now in this case where the child is on saying,
Now that's now what we call ascertainable wishes of a child. At the time, by the time the child is getting to 14 years, this is someone the court can listen to. And we've had that situation where we go to court and the child is even testifies in court and he says, this is it, I am not interested in a relationship with my father.
Oh.
Yes, we've had that situation and the judge takes that into account and said, I understand what you're saying and we will not force a relationship.
Okay.
When you're ready and you are willing, that door is always open. But in this case, this can be taken into account. 14 is someone who is mature and understands.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, the other circumstance that I was putting across to you, and it's being put across by a couple of people, perhaps the children are being compelled to stay with a party that they feel is not fair to them, or is not taking care of their needs, or is abusive in one way or another. During the proceedings, is there leeway for perhaps the judge or anyone to interview the children, you know, privately, to understand the full extent of the circumstances?
That is very, very much possible. And either party can request the court to interview the child. And this can happen before the parties testify, but usually it happens after the parties have already testified. The judges are usually very willing to hear children out. So it's not something that can't happen. It can happen. The judges will request, let me have an interview with the child. And it's just the child and the judge, no one else is in the room. And the judge takes notes and he hears out the child, and this is taken into account. The issue is how weighty is that testimony of the child.
I see.
Which is based now on age and on the and based on the demeanor of the child. But judges do interview children, and it's private and is taken into account.
Okay. Ezekiel, when you're doing the interviews with the children, do you do them in their homes? Do you do them in private? How do you conduct this to ensure that they are actually objective?
Well, actually, we carry out the interviews at their places. But of course, we have to own ourselves. And we actually tell the court to own itself that when a child has stayed in a continuous care and custody of one parent, they are prone to be coached. That is possible. And if that happens, now the court must actually consider the best interest, because the overriding consideration here is the best interest of the child. The court must warn itself that at times the ascertainable wish of the child may not necessarily be in their best interest. So the paramount consideration should be the best interest.
Okay, so Ezekiel, have you ever found yourself in the circumstance where you are interviewing the child, you can hear what they're saying, but how they're acting is totally different? So in this case, would you ask the court to actually go further and perhaps have subsequent interviews just to ensure the circumstances are not manipulated?
Well, in most cases where a children officer has interviewed the court might actually shy away from conducting a subsequent interview because a children officer is an officer of the court. And what we do when we go to the field to collect, to gather and collect that information, we are doing that on behalf of the court. So I am saying, of course, we find ourselves in such a situation, but we have to own ourselves.
All right.
And we actually tell the court to own itself that what the child told you, as their ascertainable wish, may not necessarily be in their best interest. Why am I saying this? Because the child has the right to identity. If the child is coached to say that they do not want to stay or to see their father, then that has an effect of affecting their identity. Yes.
Okay, now when the court sends you to gather this information, do you do this anonymously? Will the other parties know who has been sent on behalf of the case, or you're anonymous?
Well, it is not anonymous. It's an open process. Because when a court issues an order for children officer's report,
yes,
if the order was requested by the plaintiff, then the plaintiff must serve that order upon the defendant. Therefore, everybody knows what is happening. It is not, you don't do it clandestinely. It is an open process. They know that tomorrow I'm going to interview the defendant who has the child, and then later on I'm going to interview the defendant.
So they know the identity of this child officer?
Not necessarily, but most advocates know us, yeah?
Okay.
Especially in Nairobi, most of them know us.
All right. Okay. All right. Let me hear from James. Now, there's another thing that's been thrown out there, and I can see the discussion happening online, is that at times the courts will say the man, the father, needs to support the children, and for some reason, they will always want to skip this responsibility by declaring themselves perhaps even, you know, broke and stuff like that. In your case, how did the court come to the conclusion that you are capable of providing?
In my case, well, I did not hide my capability to provide. Yeah, because as we were living together with my partner, I took care of everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, I was willing to continue taking care of what it was that my child needed. So I did not say at any point that I'm broke or blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Okay, and when you were going through the process, was it put across to you that perhaps there could be leeway for you to say, this is a bit too much, it goes beyond what I can afford?
Yes. You actually advise to more or less just, again, you need to understand that you have separated and you'll probably go on to move on with your life with someone else or start another family.
Yeah.
So you're advised not to take on too much, such that you'll have to go back to court if in case you defaulted on your agreement or on your order. So it's something that the both of you can manage.
I see. Yeah. All right. How about you, Nora? How has that been playing out? Nora? Nora, are you still with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So how has that been playing out?
Gladys, let me say, by the grace of God, things have worked out. They are not smooth. They're not like a straight line. But they have worked out, because what happened is once we filed in court, we had an out-of-court agreement. So it was decided who was going to do what, and then of course it goes back to court, and those are the orders that are placed. And for me, I thought it was very good, because that was sort of like a mutual agreement, you know. And I think what I'd also like to say is, contrary to what most people think, because a lot of people think maybe women are out there to get money. There are some who are out there to get money. For me, my primary concern was my child. And in those orders, or in the agreement that we reached, there was no amount of money that was coming into my pocket or even putting food on my table. Whatever was agreed upon, what he was going to take care of, he was paying directly to the institutions or places where he needed to do that. So you don't, you know, it's not like a direct benefit to the former partner, so to speak.
Yes.
So far for us, I think that's what I'd say, by the grace of God, because that for me really eased the process. And again, as one of the other guests said, it provided structure, the structure that we were looking for. What is it that you are supposed to do? What is it that I'm supposed to do?
Okay, interesting. Now, Victoria, here's the thing. Many are saying, I can see this going on, that it sounds good, systems work, but most feel disenfranchised because of the cost implication. I don't know if we still have Sudi on the line. Is Sudi ready for me now?
Oh, yes.
All right. Sudi, for you, when it came to catering for your family's needs, did they have to compel you, or you just came out rightly and said, okay, fine, this is what I can afford, this is not what I can't go further than this? How did it work?
For us, it never arose. Why? Because it wasn't in question.
Okay.
Mine was strange, as I said, from the word go. It's because even by the time I was getting those orders, when I was to appear in court, we were living in the same house. House that was still paid for. We were still eating from the same table. The kids' fees had already been paid, and we were doing all these things together. Why? Because most of our businesses, all our businesses then, were enjoined. We were 50-50 partners in all that. So that never really arose, because it was very clear on what I can and what I cannot do.
But
So-
you said you went to court, or you were taken to court
yes.
because there was the need for you to provide more.
And that's what I'm trying to explain. That was the strangest thing that happened in my case. Because I'm wondering, okay, what are we going to discuss again? Because okay. So going there, and that's why for me, I really appreciate what the court did, because it actually just made it clear that, if this is the path that you want to take, then you are going to provide this, Harsh is going to provide this. And when that happens, they didn't really go back to check or to fact check whether I'm capable of or not, because then we were living in a matrimonial home which was bought. It was not like maybe rented or whatnot. It was bought. It belonged to the both of us. So things for us didn't really take those angles when it came to I have to or should do. It was only on the basis of this is what someone needs or wants at that moment in time, and we just had to take care of it. And that's exactly what we did. So there was nothing in question. There was no fact checking. Actually, if you go back, as James said, the things if we start mentioning, it'll just look weird. Because it was never in question, the question of finances at that particular point. Never arose,
Interesting. Ezekiel, I know you represent the children, but while you are at their board, do you ever put to consideration perhaps the capability of the parents in terms of monetary means?
Well, of course, that is an issue when it comes to maintenance. It is an issue because both parents must equally provide for the children.
Yes.
And when it comes to maybe what you look at, you must apply the principles of equity. If the father is earning more, why can't they provide food? And the mother, wherever the mother is living, they live with the child. And again, if the father is endowed, they can actually pay school fees so that the mother can take some lighter responsibilities. Maybe those are some of the issues that we consider equity.
I see. Okay, Victoria. Now, as I said, there's some people who say they will not even pursue this process because they feel disenfranchised. How? They cannot afford the cost of a court process. So what happens to this huge population that has said, I will not go down this road? What are the options?
They have several options, and I would like to encourage them not to lose heart. First of all, recently, filing in the Children's Court has been made absolutely free, especially in the Chief Magistrate's Court, which is where children matters are filed. So one, there are no longer filing fees that you have to worry about. Two, you can always act in person. The Children's Court is the most friendliest court that we have. Even the registry members really offer a lot of support. You can go there and ask them any question and they will answer you. They will show you what to do. I see a lot of people acting in person in court. And you have to remember, the court always seeks the best interest of the child. So even if you're acting in person and the other side is represented by counsel, you are not at an unfair disadvantage. The court will look at what is the best interest of the child. Three, there are law firms or advocates who act pro bono. They can represent you absolutely for free. And the people are more than happy to do that. Four, there are law firms also that allow you to pay in installments. You don't have to come and you pay everything at once. You come in and this is all I've got and you pay. No. Some cases you're even allowed to pay at the very end. So you can always have that discussion with the advocate. Hey, this is where I'm at financially. This is how much I can afford. Can we get into a payment plan? Can you do pro bono? So I don't think people should lock themselves out of the judicial process. You are more than welcome to. There's always a way out. And you'll never know if you don't ask.
Very true. Well said. And clearly a lot of information that has come out of this conversation this morning on custody and child maintenance, even as many wonder if it is actually in their favor. But then again, I think the moral of this story or this conversation is that the rights of the children are actually prioritized. The rest of you can be mad at each other as much as you want, but that needs to be put first. Well, thank you, Victoria Mudama, who is a family law specialist, Ezekiel Kimani, Assistant Director at the Department of Children's Services, Nairobi area, Eusebio Sudi, who is an entrepreneur, and of course, our anonymous contributors to this conversation, Nora and James Asanteni Sana. And of course, we had Sharon, who called earlier, who also is a child who watched her parents pull and tug over them. Well, if you have any questions, anyone on this panel, I'm sure is open to actually give you the counsel that you need, even as you seek this same path. Well, tomorrow we shift gears to your health and wellness with special focus on antimicrobial resistance. Now, did you know that self-medicating yourself with medicine you get over the counter from a pharmacy could make your body resistant to it? Well, health experts call it the silent pandemic that is informing poor outcomes in health facilities today. More on this tomorrow from 7 a.m.
Presenting the